We have filed a lawsuit against the University of New Mexico, the NCAA, and Coach Robert Davey as a result of the suicide death of Nige Flowers. A little bit of the background, Nige played football for the Lobos and was suffering from some depression. He was suffering from some injuries. He was trying to seek help on campus. He went to the campus doctors who recommended that he not play football for a time while he was recovering. The football coach overruled them and insisted that he play. It was clear in retrospect, and it would have been clear in real time had there been proper training and expertise involved, that Nige needed some medically professional assistance and guidance just to get him through a temporarily tough moment in his young life, which was a result of a combination of both injuries, and it turns out after his death, it may have also been related to some brain injuries from football. But what we have learned is that the university's football program carried more weight than the health and well-being of their student athletes. And the consequence was inevitable and devastating to this family and to the community when Nige, who had sought help, who did not get help, finally found no way out except to take his own life. Since then, we have found other similar incidents, 24 complaints from NCAA and NFL players who because of CTE, which Nige suffered from as well, committed suicide. This lawsuit's purpose is to shine a light on the need to protect athletes in a very violent sport and to allow Nige's parents their day in court to see and to show the jury that they will have, to show the jury that they will have who this young man is. What I'd like to do at this time is I will turn it over to and let you hear from Vicki Gilmore, the mom, and Levante Flowers, the dad. And Ben Crump, who is also on the line, will unmute and say a few words. I'll pass this on now to Vicki and Levante.
Vicki.
Good afternoon. I just have prepared something brief for you guys to hear. I hope none of you will ever have to sit in my seat. I hope none of you will have to start every single day with the hole in your heart like the one I have in mine. I hope none of you have to cry yourself to sleep, unable to breathe every night, knowing that your child, your beautiful, bright, talented, and loving baby boy has took his own life because he wasn't heard. He wasn't being listened to, and his mental and physical well-being were not prioritized. His sweet and selfless personality is what kept him from demanding the care he deserved as a human and not just a football player. He never wanted to let anyone down or be anyone's burden. You asked me to give you my son, who was a smart and talented young man, to play for your school, and I was assured that the University of New Mexico family would take care of him. Our families hoped he would return with a higher education and a bright future ahead. I never imagined that he would return home by funeral arrangements. Even though my heart no longer beats the same, I know my son will always be with me, and I owe it to his memory to do everything in my power to make sure no parent has to sit in my seat and live with the emptiness I will forever.
Okay.
What I just wanted to say is that my son was a loving son. We brought him to New Mexico where he was playing football and he was trying to get his education as well. The whole city of Albuquerque loved him. He loved them as well. So for him to go there do everything right as he was told to do. And he wasn't heard from the college nor from his head coach. And we brought him out there for a better education and for, like I said, just a better education, you know, and it hurts both of us. Like we have a hole in our heart.
Yes.
Every day. We can't sleep, can't eat right, you know, and it hurts. So I just want justice for his memory and for us to have ease and pain. We give it to God, and we just want everything to be settled right.
Thank you. I think now we're going to have some comments and words by Ben Crump.
Thank you, Attorney Hilaire, and to Attorney Hilliard. I'm very honored to work with y'all in representing this family who is owed a great debt. They are owed an apology, and they are owed a debt. They are owed an apology and a debt from Bob Davie. They are owed an apology and a debt from the University of New Mexico, and they are owed an apology and a debt from the NCAA because they lied to Mr. and Mrs. Flowers when they said that they would look after the health and well-being and the development of Najee, their young son, who they bought to play football. But it turns out that they value his life, his mental health, and his physical health a little less if he couldn't get on the football field and perform. And so what this really is about is speaking truth to power. This family has seen up close and personal that they were lied to because their son's life did not matter once he could not get out on the football field on Saturday and perform. And so with Attorney Hilaire and Attorney Hilliard, we intend to make sure this family gets the apology they do deserve from each of these entities and individuals. And more importantly, even though there is no amount that can pay the debt that these parents are owed, we are hopeful that it will send a message that the next child who is struggling with mental health will be treated better than they treated Najee Flowers. Thank you, Attorney Hilaire.
Thank you, Mr. Crump. And I believe now we are available and willing to answer any questions.
Okay, sure. All right, so please use the Q&A feature in Zoom to type in your questions, and we will answer as many as we can. And if you can, please include your outlet and your name. I'll give it a few seconds for our media friends to type in their questions. Okay, our first question is from Ryan Laughlin. What role did Bob Davie play in putting Flowers' health at risk?
Bob, do you want to take that?
I will. So as the head coach, he's the captain of the ship, and he ultimately decides whether or not a player who has an injury should play, and he passes his directives down to his assistant coaches. There's no doubt that this is an epidemic of ignoring players' illnesses. And it's pretty easy if you have a broken arm to see that a player can't play, but when you are struggling psychologically, and that psychological struggle is a direct result of the football that you've played your entire life, what the coaches are going to say and what's almost built traditionally into that sport is to tough it out and to get on the field. But what's happening organically inside this young man's brain is that you actually have spinal fluid that's leaking as a result of the years of impacts, and he is in the middle of a ongoing trauma that he cannot fix, and that it continues to get worse. And so Davy's responsibility is the ultimate responsibility, because he has to implement or insist on the implementation of the protocol and you may see it in the NFL sometimes, the guys that wear the red hat and they can point to a player and they're out if there's any suspicion that there's been a concussion. There was no protocol in place, or if there was, it was ignored, which makes it worse, because Nige actually went to a doctor, and the doctor was concerned enough to say you shouldn't play, but that was overruled because there was a game coming up, and Nige was a strong, athletic, and big young man, and they needed his body, but to get his body, they threw the man under the bus.
Right. And to add to that also, Davies, and when you're going through the process of being recruited, Davies, alongside with other coaches, they come forward, they spoke to Vicky directly and Levante directly, and promotes himself as being that mature adult who's going to sit in the shoes of the parents. And when you look at a parent and you look in their eyes and you say, I'm going to protect your son, you're expecting them to make calls that, although the team may suffer, it's going to benefit the child. And in this particular case, it wasn't done with respect to Naji and his mental health.
Thank you. All right. Steve Gardner with USA Today asks, what is the charge in the lawsuit against the NCAA, UNM, et cetera?
John Duff, Marion, I'm going to let you handle the specific allegations one by one, please. These are lawyers with my firm.
While they're go ahead, John.
You can go ahead, Mike. I was pulling up right now.
Okay. Well, I think it requires a little bit of stepping back as to why the NCAA is also being named. Again, through the recruiting process, through the clearance process, there are steps and hurdles that Division I athletes have to abide by. Rules, and again, as Attorney Hilliard said, protocols that they have to abide by. And in exchange for an athlete adhering to those protocols and procedures and doing what they need to do to be cleared to play a sport that is producing revenue in the billions for the NCAA and for the schools, it's important that in exchange for that, the NCAA has put itself as the liaison between colleges and the athletes to be there to protect them. And so the basis of the allegations in our complaint initially start from the fundamental premise that the NCAA was developed and put together to protect athletes. And they then develop a contract with that athlete that says, you do steps ABC, we will ensure that you are not endangered, that you receive an education, and you receive basic general welfare, i.e. a scholarship, so that you are set up to produce on the field and in the classroom. And so step one is that particular contract was broken with respect to Nige. Duff, do you have anything else you'd like to elaborate on with respect to why we have claims against the NCAA?
Yes, the various claims are 1983 claims, 1988 claims, and Title VI claims for not protecting Nige, for pretty much allowing a coach in a school to treat him with such disrespect, and not protecting and providing for his mental health, which is supposed to be a very big issue to the NCAA. And they may claim that they do that, but nothing was done to protect Nige in this situation.
Hey, John Duff, will you also speak to the CTE and the test results from the autopsy?
I was going to
Yes.
say briefly before John get into that, and following up with what Mika was articulating, I've had the honor of working with Dr. Malu, who we all know from the NFL concussion cases. He's the foremost authority on this matter. And he believed that the NCAA, as well as the National Football League, has known for years that these physical injuries that were being sustained by the brain of these players had to be monitored very closely. And we believe that they failed in acknowledging the damage that their sport was causing to these young men's bodies, especially, as Attorney Hilaire said, while they were making billions. They, at best, turned a blind eye, not following their procedures appropriately. At worst, they just did not care enough about the young men who played football health when it stood in contrast to the business, the big business of college football.
Yes, addressing the CTE, there was CTE indications of it found during the autopsy that was actually conducted by the University of New Mexico. We've asked them to preserve all samples of the brain so we can actually have it tested by an impartial third party. Then it will be tested and examined. But the University of Mexico alone has already said that the tau deposition was vocally present in Najee's brain, showing signs of CTE, which is clearly shown for decades that causes mental health issues, suicidal thoughts, and depression.
Also, I'd like the parents to talk about, after Najee died, whether or not Coach Bob Davies ever reached out to them, or what he said to them when he reached out to them.
No.
He did once.
One time he did. One time he sent just a text message. But when we went to the college itself, when we went to the college and we went to the players' locker room, Mr. Davey went on and showed us stickers they was going, emblems they was going to put on the helmets. But his compassion and his sympathy wasn't there. It's about football. It's supposed to be about the player. It's supposed to be about, you have a 53-man roster. You're supposed to take care of all your 53 men on that team. And the way he came on with us, he was just no sympathy whatsoever. No compassion whatsoever. He was
very
just
disrespectful.
very disrespectful.
Vicki, remember you specifically said, I want to get more answers. I want to understand what happened to my son. And how did he respond to you? He said words to the effect of, what do you want from me? Something like
he said, what do you want from me? And I said, I want answers. Well, there are no answers. And then he said, so what, do I need to go get a lawyer or something? Like he was just very disrespectful. And he walked up on me, and my other son walked up on him. So we had to kind of control that situation. But then even as we left, he started, he laughed in my face, like, what, like just being very cocky, just nasty. And it was very rude and hurtful because that's not what we were there for.
He actually threw up his hands and said, I don't have time
for this.
This is after Najee died.
Yes. This is when we returned to get Najee from the college itself, well, from his body and his personal items.
Yeah, he said he don't have time for that. We could speak to his lawyer if we wanted to. And I asked him, I said, where did that come from? Why are you even talking about a lawyer?
And you didn't have a lawyer at that time, right?
Nobody was going for no lawyer.
It was not even a thought. We were just there to get Najee's belongings and talk with the coaching staff. But it turned out to be an argument, so to speak. But I refused to argue back and forth with him. So we just gathered, the kids that came with us, my sister and my son, and we left. We just left to not hear from him anymore.
Even the day when I went to senior day, I was the only one that went to senior day. And when I did go to senior day, the The coaching staff, they show compassion, but Bob Davie himself still was not sympathetic. And I'm like, and I asked him himself, do you have kids? And he's jumped to defense. Yes, I have 5 kids. 3 of them play football. And it was just so, he jumped to defense. And when you have a lost one, you should have no defense. You should be nothing but sympathetic.
All right, so our next question comes from Brittany with KRQE. When you say Mr. Flowers was forced to play, was he threatened with a specific kind of punishment or retaliation by the coach if he did not, or if he refused to play?
I can take that one. Najee had went to seek help because he was not feeling like himself. And after speaking with a health professional at the university, it was actually recommended that he take a break from football. And so when Najee then said, okay, this is good, I'm going to get time, I'm going to rest, I'm going to get the mental break that I need, he then thought that that was going to happen, to only find out that he was then contacted again by the therapist. And the therapist said, I'm sorry, this is above my head, and essentially rescinded his medical advice that would require Najee to not have to play. And then Najee was forced to play. And we believe that it was that act, amongst others, that really caused him to be in a downward spiral. I mean, at this point, he didn't know who else could help him. He had the courage to go seek treatment with a therapist, which, as we know, is already a huge step in the right direction. And there's a huge stigma attached to going to seek help, especially by a big, strong football player. So that is how it came to be that he was forced to play.
And that was the Wyoming game that he sustained, I think, one of the worst injuries, because he never called me after the game. And he calls after every game, but on that Wyoming game, I never heard from him. I didn't hear from him for days.
And I think the other thing which Attorney Hilliard touched upon is that it's one thing to have all of the concussions and the physicality that's with football, but what's not addressed is how that physicality impacts your state of mind. I mean, they've done numerous studies that show just the connection between pain and depression. So let alone what's going on in the brains of these young men, their brains are still developing at this time.
Thank you. Is there any evidence that other coaches on Bob Davie's staff or any officials from the UNM athletics department were aware that the doctor's advice was overruled?
So we are just starting the discovery phase to where we will take depositions of all the assistant coaches. What you've heard today is it's pretty clear that when the request for Najee not to play made it to the head coach, similarly to how he treated the parents after the death, it's not going to be a surprise that he overruled any request should it have been made. But until the depositions are taken of all the assistant coaches, of the doctor who recommended that Najee not play, and of Bob Davie himself, all we can do is gather witnesses information, and we don't have that answer yet, but it will be part of the process of getting ready for trial to learn what assistant coaches were told, whether their recommendation was overruled, because it appears that they were compassionate, but they also answered to the head coach, and a team is only as compassionate as the head coach allows it to be. And this head coach had no room for compassion for his players, and likely for his assistant coaches either.
We have another question here. The NCAA is also named in the civil suit. What role does the NCAA play, and are there larger changes systemically that need to change to protect future athletes in a similar position as Mr. Flowers?
Right. The NCAA, in a very similar way to the NFL, is you can't implement a change in one college and then protect the player at the other college. You know, this has to come with strong penalties for the schools who do not follow the protocols. Because if you're trying to make a bowl game and you have to get a win, And if you have a player who has the issues that Nige has, are you going to listen to the school psychologist, or are you going to tell your assistant coach to go tell that player that he is damn sure going to suit up and he's damn sure going to play, or he's going to lose his scholarship? So that's completely within the realm of the script. So the NCAA, is there an echo here? Yeah, I'm hearing. Well, so the NCAA has to implement almost a death penalty if you do not follow the mental health protocols should a player.
Right, and on the heels of that as well, so, you know, we're looking for more funding to be allocated to issues of mental health, especially with also so that there can actually be a liaison or an ombudsman or someone there that can actually be on the lookout for the health of the athletes, and someone who is not beholden to any of the advice or recommendations or influence of any of the head coaches, a standalone, independent, impartial person. And that's something that the parents really would like to push for to honor their son. And then finally, the harsher penalties. I mean, if you have rules and protocols, if it's just in black and white and not really enforced, it's not going to teach.
Well, and I would add to that once the mental health professional decides that a player the coaches
Mike, I think it's coming from yours. Sorry.
Yeah, I think I'm going to make sure there's nothing else around the phone.
If you could mute, please. Yeah, so once the mental health experts that a player should not play, then the coaches have to be out of the picture. The scholarship has to be protected. There can't be any pressure put on the player, because if a coach gets to overrule a doctor in order to get a win, then you're going to have another Nige Flowers tragedy. It has to be just unequivocal that mental health and a concern about mental health carries the day, and it doesn't matter who you play on Friday. And that's just not the case right now at New Mexico, or I would expect across the board in the NCAA when it comes close to bowl season.
Thank you. And we have one last question here. Jeff Grammer of the Albuquerque Journal. UNM has said it has sought state financial help to offer more mental health support for its college athletes. Do you feel Najee received adequate attention initially? Was the help there, and is this a matter of coaches intervening after the help, or was the help never there?
So Jeff, I actually read your question and answered it in my previous answer, but to expound on it, the help was there and it was available, and Najee sought it and he received it. But the flaw in the system is you have to still go to the coach and make the recommendation. The coaches have to be taken out of the equation at that point. And as soon as the mental health experts say there's an issue here, then the player's well-being is the only thing that matters, and he does not play, and no pressure is allowed to be put on him. And the only way to do that in the environment of football is to implement strict consequences should it occur. And those consequences have to start from the NCAA down, where if it turns out that a coach influenced a decision and a player played, sooner or later you'll have a consequence like this, and the school has to suffer financially in real time to be sure that the player is protected, not the school and not the win and loss record.
Thank you. Well, that concludes the Q&A portion. I don't know if we want to say anything else before we conclude today, but again, if you do have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to press@bencrump.com.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.